Alright everyone, welcome back. Sending you the absolute biggest virtual hug and wishing you nothing but amazing health, tons of energy, and all the good vibes today and always. Seriously, taking care of yourselves is the most important thing, so wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I hope you're feeling fantastic right now. Now, let's tackle a question that worries a lot of people, especially when they hear scary headlines about mercury in fish. Is salmon high in mercury? It's a really important question because you want to enjoy this super healthy fish without freaking out about something toxic, right? So, let's cut through the confusion, dive into the real science, and find out once and for all if you need to be worried about mercury when you tuck into that delicious salmon fillet. Get ready, because the answer might surprise you and actually put your mind at ease. First off, let's talk about mercury itself. Mercury is a heavy metal that's naturally found in the environment, but it also gets released into the air and water from things like burning coal and industrial processes. Once it's in water, tiny microorganisms transform it into a form called methylmercury. This is the nasty stuff that builds up in fish. The key thing to understand is that methylmercury accumulates up the food chain. Think of it like this: tiny little plankton absorb a tiny bit of mercury. Small fish eat lots of plankton, so they absorb and build up a bit more mercury. Then, bigger fish eat lots of those smaller fish, absorbing and concentrating all the mercury from their prey. So, the longer a fish lives and the higher up the food chain it is, the bigger predator it is, the more time it has to eat contaminated prey and build up potentially dangerous levels of mercury. That's why massive, long-lived ocean predators like sharks, swordfish, king mackerel, and some types of tuna, especially big-eye and albacore/white tuna, are the ones that consistently show up on the high mercury warning lists. They've been swimming around for decades, gobbling up other fish, and packing that mercury into their bodies. So, where does salmon fit into all this? This is the good news. Salmon is generally considered one of the lowest mercury fish you can eat. Seriously, major health organizations like the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and health groups worldwide consistently classify salmon as a best choice or low-mercury fish. Why is that? It all comes down to salmon's biology and lifestyle. Salmon aren't those giant, top-of-the-food-chain predators like sharks or swordfish. They are much lower down. While they do eat smaller fish and krill, they don't live nearly as long. Most salmon species have relatively short lifespans. Pacific salmon species like sockeye, coho, pink, and chum typically live only 3 to 7 years. Even Atlantic salmon, which can live longer, especially farmed ones, usually aren't harvested at super old ages. Because their lives are shorter, they simply don't have the time to accumulate massive amounts of mercury like a shark that might live 50 years. They also aren't constantly eating other large, mercury-contaminated fish in the same way. Wild salmon spend part of their life in relatively clean freshwater rivers and then migrate to the ocean, which also influences their exposure. So, biologically, they just aren't set up to be mercury sponges. Now, let's get specific about types of salmon, because there is a little nuance. Wild-caught salmon, particularly from well-managed fisheries like Alaska, is consistently shown to have incredibly low mercury levels. Alaska tests its salmon extensively, and the results are consistently reassuring. Mercury levels are way below the safety limits. Alaskan wild salmon, sockeye, coho, pink, etc., is often considered among the safest fish you can choose regarding mercury. Farmed salmon, Atlantic salmon, also generally falls into the low mercury category. Studies comparing farmed and wild salmon usually find that mercury levels are low in both, though sometimes farmed salmon might show slightly higher average levels than wild. Why the slight difference? It often comes down to the feed. Farmed salmon are fed pellets that can include fish meal and fish oil derived from smaller wild fish. If those smaller fish sources come from waters with higher mercury, there could be a tiny bit more transfer. However, reputable salmon farms source their feed ingredients carefully, and mercury levels in farmed salmon are still considered very low and safe by regulatory standards. The important takeaway is that whether it's wild or farmed, salmon is firmly in the low mercury camp compared to the truly high mercury fish. How low are we actually talking? Let's look at some numbers to make it real. Safety limits for mercury are measured in parts per million, ppm. The FDA has an action level of 1.0 ppm, meaning fish averaging above this level warrant concern. Most salmon species, both wild and farmed, average around 0.01 to 0.05 ppm. Compare that to something like swordfish, which averages about 0.995 ppm, getting very close to that 1.0 ppm limit. Shark is similar. King mackerel averages around 0.73 ppm. Even albacore, white, tuna averages about 0.35 ppm, significantly higher than salmon. So, salmon mercury levels are often 10 to 100 times lower than those high-risk fish. Eating a serving of salmon exposes you to a minuscule amount of mercury compared to eating the same amount of swordfish or shark. It's a huge difference. Here's another fascinating point: salmon might actually have a built-in defense system against mercury. Salmon is incredibly rich in a mineral called selenium. Selenium is a powerful antioxidant that's essential for your health, and it has a special relationship with mercury. Mercury likes to bind tightly to selenium in the body. When selenium binds to mercury, it essentially neutralizes it, making the mercury less harmful and easier for your body to eliminate. Scientists call this the selenium-mercury molar ratio. If a fish has more selenium than mercury, a high ratio, the selenium can effectively counteract the mercury toxicity. Salmon almost always has way more selenium than mercury. In fact, it has such a high selenium to mercury ratio that many researchers believe the selenium actually protects you from any potential negative effects of the tiny amount of mercury present. It's like having a superhero bodyguard escorting the bad guy out. This protective selenium is another reason why salmon is such a safe and healthy choice. So, who needs to be the most careful about mercury, even with low mercury fish like salmon? The main groups are pregnant women, women who might become pregnant, breastfeeding mothers, and young children. This is because mercury can potentially harm the developing brain and nervous system of a fetus or young child. However, even for these groups, the advice is not to avoid salmon. In fact, health experts strongly encourage these groups to eat fish, including salmon, because the benefits are so huge. The omega-3 fatty acids, especially DHA, in salmon are absolutely critical for a baby's brain and eye development. The FDA and EPA specifically recommend that pregnant/breastfeeding women and young children eat 2 to 3 servings per week of fish from their best choices list, which includes salmon, specifically highlighting its low mercury and high nutrient benefits. They advise limiting or avoiding only the high mercury fish, swordfish, shark, king mackerel, tilefish from the Gulf of Mexico. So, for moms and kids, salmon is actually a recommended superstar food, not something to fear. For healthy adults and older children, eating salmon several times a week is perfectly safe and incredibly beneficial. What about eating salmon every day? Is that okay mercury-wise? Given its very low levels, eating salmon daily is generally not considered a mercury risk for most healthy adults. The selenium protection also helps. However, nutritionists often recommend variety in your diet. While salmon is amazing, eating different types of fish ensures you get a wider range of nutrients and minimizes any potential exposure to other contaminants, like PCBs, which can be slightly higher in some farmed salmon, though still regulated. It also supports ocean sustainability. So, enjoying salmon frequently, say 3 to 4 times a week, is fantastic. Maybe throw in some super low mercury options like sardines or anchovies, loaded with calcium too. Some shrimp or some trout on other days for a delicious and diverse seafood diet. But if you absolutely love salmon and eat it daily, the mercury risk is still extremely low. The bottom line is incredibly reassuring: no, salmon is not high in mercury. It's consistently ranked as one of the safest, lowest mercury fish choices available. Whether you choose wild Alaskan salmon, wild Pacific salmon, or responsibly farmed Atlantic salmon, the mercury levels are minimal and far below safety concerns. The powerful benefits of salmon, those incredible omega-3s for your heart and brain, the vitamin D for your bones and immunity, the high-quality protein, the selenium, massively outweigh any negligible risk from mercury. For vulnerable groups like pregnant women and young children, salmon is actively encouraged as a vital part of a healthy diet. So, please, enjoy your salmon without mercury worries. Grill it, bake it, poach it, put it in salads, savor that delicious flavor and know you're doing something fantastic for your body. Thanks so much for watching, take wonderful care of yourselves, and I'll catch you in the next video. Stay healthy and keep enjoying that amazing salmon.